Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I am joined by Will Chapman on Open House today. Will is our financial guru. How are you, Will?
Good, thanks, Greg. How are you?
Now, one quick thing before we kick off. Brock, Harcourt Financial Services no more.
No, we've transitioned to what is the international brand of Mortgage Express, which is a fantastic move. It gives us certainly a new platform to leverage our business moving forward, and a great opportunity. We've got both Mortgage Express and Insurance Express, so we've got the insurance arm expanding as well, which
Beautiful.
is great.
So what we will have to do is update your logo on our Open House site, won't we?
That'd be great.
Now, Will, big surprise. Interest rates 0.25 up. Westpac 0.45 up.
CBA 0.45 up.
Close. I knew it was one of the big four.
But
what is going on there?
Well, it did surprise us a little bit that interest rates went up. I think the economists widely had tipped that they weren't going to go up. In hindsight, the reasons are probably fairly straightforward. The RBA wanted to be a little bit preemptive.
Reserve Bank?
The Reserve Bank, that's right, wanted to be a little bit preemptive because it would be quite difficult to raise them in December, and then they don't meet in January, so we wouldn't be able to do anything till February. That said, I think probably the biggest surprise was CBA saying, well, we're going to go over and above. I do remember having a conversation with somebody on Tuesday morning about whether or not banks would go over and above, and I ironically said if CBA announced first, I thought they would probably go 0.25, which would be a good thing because it would then put all the other banks in check.
Yeah.
Now the other banks have got the opportunity to raise well and truly above as the precedent has been set, and they certainly spent a few days waiting until putting the pressure on CBA as far as publicly to cop a bit of flack, and then they'll just slide in their announcements.
It's really interesting. Well, I went to an economist last night and I actually listened, stayed awake and listened. Two things. One, he was very critical of the performance of banks as a profit.
Yes.
He said, look, banks are not good business. We read in the paper these billions of dollars or millions of dollars of profits. They never hit the top, 100 even companies, top 10 certainly. Why is that? Why is there such a turnover of business, but they just don't seem to be able to make a big profit?
Well, there is a bit of competition in the market, I have to say. I'm not sure what context you were saying that.
Just banks, generally, businesses generally, banks have never been a really strong performer compared with the amount of turnover that they've got.
Well, there is a lot of competition certainly in the money market per se. You are trading in the same thing, which is an Australian dollar, a US dollar, a British pound, for instance. So there's a lot of competition in that market. Banks need to find their niche as far as their products and policies to be able to stay competitive and turn a profit over. And that's not only just in the debt side of things, which is what we spend a lot of time talking about, but also the savings side of things, and then institutional banking and interbanking transactions. So
I got the feeling what he was intimating was banks don't actually run a really brilliant business.
They're profitable, they're blue chip. As for their administration, I'm sure every bank would confirm that they want to be more administratively more efficient, but they're profitable.
Yeah. Now, the other one he said, which interested me more, one of the reasons for the Reserve Bank possibly putting up interest rates was to put a little bit of a hold on the medium house price rises across Australia.
Yes.
So that the wages over a period of time could catch up.
Yeah.
It's what we feel as though the wages are obviously sneaking up, the CPI, whatever it is, but the medium house prices have actually shot ahead, making them unaffordable.
Yeah, my commentary, I would agree with that to an extent. The RBA's main focus is to look at the inflation figures. The reason a lot of economists thought it wasn't going to go up was utility bills, power, electricity, all of these things had actually gone up in price. There was an inflation figure. Now, normally, the RBA wants to stop inflation, but for that type of inflation, that's not deemed as discretionary spending. People have to pay for power, they have to pay for heating and water, etc. So that was going to be a good opportunity for them to not raise it up. I tend to agree that one of the benefits, I suppose, of putting it up early is that it doesn't allow the housing market to go totally gangbusters, and it does give a little bit of control as far as wage earnings. And certainly that's one of the things that they would be looking to ramp up, is if our economy is going well, then you're at some point going to see a wages push. So the amount that people earn is going to increase, which then increases their borrowing capacity, which then, I suppose, starts to roll onto a stronger economy. So the controls are there. I don't think it's their first priority, but I think that it would be an important benefit.
Can I just touch on something completely different? The stimulus package of 2008.
Well, mostly 8, rolled out through 9. Yep.
Again, this guy had a really interesting comment. He said that I think it was about $17 billion was rolled out in forms of $900 here and whatever. The majority of that money hit the pokies in this sort of order. Pokies paying off small debt, electricals like TVs, etc., and black market. The real reason there was a stimulus of our economy was interest rates dropped 4% in that period of time. $50-60 billion worth of savings, and oil dropped. I think he said around about another $15 billion. So $75 billion worth of savings in our skyrockets on the fact of those two things rather than Rudd handing out a bit of coin. What do you reckon?
Well, I haven't seen the figures, but it doesn't surprise me. A lot of the money was spent, we saw many cases in the media, but a lot of money was spent on electrical goods, certainly, and in many cases that profit doesn't necessarily go just to Australia but goes overseas. We did, with the initial cash handouts, I'll put a lot of that money towards paying down a lot of debt, especially credit card debt, and that was a good thing. The government was saying, it's not a good thing, it's not stimulatory, that type of thing. The reality is people are in a better position today because they made those decisions back then. And I think over the next 6 to 12 months, we really need to start focusing on that. One of the hidden things when interest rates go up, you always hear the media talk about how much it's going to cost as far as your repayment on your house is going to go up. What people don't always have pointed out to them is your credit card interest rates are going to go up every time. They usually go up more than the 0.25%. So think about paying off your credit card debt. I think it's a great way of going. It does a handful of things. It certainly stops you accruing that interest. It certainly gives you a lot more cash in your pocket in the long term, and it also stops you from having that stress that people have to, take into account every single month.
The old monthly juggle.
Yeah, you just it comes in and goes out, and it comes in and goes out. So you want to try and reduce the stress associated with that as well.
Really good point. One last one before we go, Will. Aussie dollar. Now I'm heading off to New York tomorrow, so I reckon it's ripping that it's about dollar for dollar.
Yeah.
What impact does that have, though, for Australian economy?
Well, the very simple one is if you're an exporter, it costs you more to do business because, quite frankly, people overseas can't afford to buy as much of your product. So certainly even in the mining industry, that's one big thing. Wine distributors, tourism, those types of industries.
Tourism, I think, is a big one.
Absolutely.
The Americans could get a fair bit more for their money when it was 67
Absolutely.
cents. They'd be more likely to come
much more Absolutely. Or Europe and big spending out of the Asian sector as well. As far as importers, well, essentially you're going overseas, you're going to be spending and buying US dollars and spending US dollars. What a great time for you to be going to New York. And if you're in the import type business, then things have got a little bit cheaper, I have to say. And that's probably one of the things that surprised me a little bit coming back to the Reserve Bank and banks going over and above that 0.25 increase, is ironically just in that past few month period where it's gone from say 90 cents to $1, money's got essentially 10% cheaper. So the bank's using the excuse that, hey, their cost of funds is going up. Well, certainly they're not going up that much because it's got a lot cheaper if they're buying money in from overseas. So it's one of those things, but lovely time to be going overseas. I'm a bit jealous.
I'll make the most of it. Will Chapman, Mortgage Express, thank you very much for your time as usual, mate. Very knowledgeable and entertaining. Keep an eye on the interest rates, pay off your credit cards, still get out there and buy property because they're still low, aren't they?
Hey, it's still there's still some fantastic opportunities out there. And I would say this time of the year, lots of properties have come onto the market. It's a good time to go out, have a look and see what's out there.
Very good indeed. Thank you very much, Will Chapman, Mortgage Express. We're back to Open House. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you found that as interesting as I did. Will Chapman is a wealth of knowledge. After the break, ladies and gentlemen, we are back with Peter Pedler from Duncan Bashir Hannon. Really interesting chat with Peter's ventures through Nepal.